This is Leaders in the Trenches, and your host today is Gene Hammett.
Hi, this is Gene Hammett. I am the host of Leaders in the Trenches. My question for you today is, how do you promote the content that you have in your business? How do you promote the podcast, or how do you promote the blog post or the article that you're writing week in, week out, or maybe it's every month? If you have a marketing strategy to create content for your customers, to generate leads for your business, then you want to understand the promotion strategies of that. Today, I have Michael Brenner. Michael's group, Marketing Insider Group, really has some depth of knowledge across many big companies, but he's going to share with you some things that you can do, not only for big companies and small companies. We talk about the Hollywood strategy and what that means to your content promotion. We talk about the bet on the winner strategy. I'm smiling when I say it because it really is a smart thing to do, and not many people are doing it. And I'll even raise my hand. I haven't been doing this one. And even I know it's the right thing to do, but we tell you exactly what it is inside today's interview. So if you want to grow your business, you want to have a great content strategy, you've got to have the right promotion strategy that goes with it. So here is Michael Brenner. Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Happy to have you at Leaders in the Trenches.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here.
Michael, I've already introduced our audience about you and some of the work that you've done, some of the accomplishments you have, but I'd love to hear from you. So tell us about what you're up to and who you serve.
Yeah, I mean, I serve Fortune 500 companies, startup founders, companies, public sector, private sector, you name it, just about every industry that has an audience that wants to get educated is pretty much my only filter. With content marketing strategies, employee activation strategies, and even recently doing some kind of culture, leadership, organizational change initiatives as well. Fantastic.
You're known throughout the world. You've got a recent honor, Brand 24.
Mm-hmm.
They recognize you, on the top 20?
I think so.
I have it on my my hard drive, but I didn't want to switch over. So you were recognized as one of the top minds in marketing, along with Gary Vee and John Hall, and a lot of other people too. So, what do you think contributed to that, other than you have a lot of a following?
Yeah, I mean, it's I joke with my kids that I'm like a C-list celebrity in a sea of people that aren't really celebrities at all. Yeah, I think there's Gary, and there's Ann Handley, who I love and respect, and there's a few folks that just everyone knows, and then I think there's a few of us that have some niche sort of notoriety. I guess I've just been at it for a while. I started, I think, sharing, blogging, and tweeting and all that good stuff, about 10 years ago. And when I started trying to figure out the world of digital and the impact it was having on marketing, I just didn't feel like there were enough internal marketing corporate folks that were sharing their stories and trials and tribulations. So I made that commitment back then. And I think that's really just what's contributed to it. I continue to give away more consulting than I've ever been paid for on my blog and in my book, and hope to continue to do so, because I just believe in giving back and believe in the positive karma that comes from doing that. And so I'm honored to see my name in lists like that. I joke with my kids about it because it really isn't a big deal. I don't think I get more projects or get paid more because of it, but it's always it's nice to be recognized in our fields for adding thought leadership to the conversations that matter.
That reminds me of one time my son, who was, I think, about 8 years old at the time, they said, "Is anyone's parents famous?" And he raised his hand and said, "My dad is." And she's like, "What is he?" And he goes, "He's a podcaster." And she goes, "He's a broadcaster?" And he goes, "No, podcaster." She goes, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
Not really famous. But in certain circles people look up to us because you've been on big stages. You've advised a lot of clients to help them with their content strategy. So I want to dive in here with this question. Like, you look at a lot of people's stuff. You get to see a breadth and a depth of content marketing strategies. Where do people make mistakes that they don't even realize they're making mistakes?
Well, the biggest mistake, and it's shocking to me how few companies have it, but is just a lack of having a strategy documented in the first place. The Content Marketing Institute, Marketing Profs, a lot of these organizations have done surveys, and just about 85-90% of companies say they have a strategy. But it's less than a third of them have actually written it down and shared it with their team, which is kind of insane because really it means the strategy probably varies across the organization. It probably isn't, completely understood or not necessarily for sure bought in by stakeholders inside of marketing, let alone outside of marketing. That's the biggest mistake that I really, and when I do my speaking to marketers, the number one thing I tell them is, listen, use me, use somebody else, internal, external. You've got a strategy in your head or someone else's head. Get it written down, get it shared across the organization, get buy-in from the sales team or the product folks or the executive team. That's really the biggest mistake that I see marketers make. And the implications of that mistake are really lost revenue, wasted effort in creating content, campaigns that don't deliver any return on investment. It's really massive amounts of waste because of just a simple lack of documented strategy.
And what we're really talking about is people who are doing stuff, but there's really no cohesive plan behind it, and people just aren't aligned together. We doing stuff every week or every month, right?
It's funny. It's amazing how many people, and this is true of marketing and it's true outside of marketing, that a lot of employees, I think, folks that we might know, friends of yours you see at the barbecue or something, we all think our job sometimes is just to do what we're told. And like you said, just doing stuff. And that's not our job. Our job is to actually make an impact to the companies that we work for. And hopefully, if you're really lucky, you might enjoy doing it. And so, to me, that's, I think, something, part of what I want to do in life is to teach people that your job is not to do what you're told. Your job is to make an impact and to hopefully love what you're doing in the process. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's, I think the large majority of employees at companies, the large majority of marketers inside, brands are just doing stuff because somebody asked them to, not because it's the right thing to do, not because it's making an impact, and certainly not because they have any passion for it.
I seem to think about some of the interviews I've had before. I had Frank Blake on here before a few months ago. He's the former CEO of the Home Depot, and he was under Jack Welch. And one of the things that he told me was like, Jack loved for you to do what we told him to do, but he loved even more for you to actually go against what he thought and be right. Yeah. That was the key part. You got to go against what Jack thought, but actually be right. And I think about that with employees. Like if there was some kind of content strategy out there, it's fine if they disagree with you, but go prove me wrong by doing something and making an impact, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's some counterintuitive insights that I've learned. One of them at SAP, I was asked to generate leads for the sales organization. And so somebody like the senior vice president of sales in the retail industry would come to me and say, here's a brochure for our solution to retailers, go get leads. And I remember pushing back on these industry salespeople saying, listen, I can get you leads, but I'm not going to get it with this brochure. And because this brochure isn't really answering the customer's problem, it's not really solving a real challenge. And give me the opportunity to go prove that I'm right, kind of to your point. And what I found was that, almost in every case, customer-focused content, customer-focused approaches won out over promotion and propaganda. And more importantly, it was fun to be able to go back to the sales team and say, hey, it might seem counterintuitive, but it really does make sense. And if you want the result, if you want the leads, let us, you can't, the analogy I always used to use is you can't tell me to bake a cake and also tell me how to bake it. You can give me the ingredients and let me figure it out, or you can, you tell me you want a cake and let me go buy the ingredients and figure out the recipe, but you can't have it both ways.
When you think about content marketing strategies and specifically lead generation, what's working now? Because I think things are shifting faster than they've ever shifted before. What do you recommend we look at as B2B companies?
Yeah, so I used to the two of the trends that I used to talk a lot about were humanity and visualization. Personalization is the third, but that's almost becoming so it's table stakes now, really, that we need to personalize. But what we're seeing real trends in is visual content that brings the human nature of the experts behind the content to life. It's going now even a step further, and friends of mine like Tim Washer and Andrew Davis. These are people, even Ann Handley, John Hall. These are folks that on stage, and I'm sure you're doing this as well. We're finding that if we're not funny and entertaining, we're missing an opportunity to deliver a message, because it's not enough just to be human anymore. We actually have to go and be a little bit more lifelike. We have to be a little funny. We have to be entertaining in a way. And it puts a little more pressure on us as speakers, as you and I know, but it also puts a lot of pressure, I think, on brands to not just commit to being human and to being, authentic is the word that a lot of people hate to use, but we actually even need to go a bit further. Another word that I love to use is just being, really sort of open and vulnerable. So, part of being funny is that we have to start by being really vulnerable. And that's another thing that brands are struggling to do right now, is to show their true humanity, through that kind of vulnerability. For example, a great example of this is tell somebody what didn't work. Tell somebody what you've struggled with. And I'll give you a quick example. We were both at Adobe Summit a couple of weeks ago, and there was a guy, quarterback Drew Brees was being interviewed, and I saw a lot of people on their phones. People weren't really interested at the Adobe Summit on what Drew Brees had to say. But as soon as he said, I turned 40 this year, and as soon as he said that, people went from their phones, looking at their phones and typing, and they looked up because they thought he was about to say something vulnerable. He's about to say, hey, I'm scared that I'm getting old. And he was able to connect with the audience immediately just by showing that kind of vulnerability.
Well, how do we do that? Because I know I do it from the stage. I really challenged myself a couple of years ago to push the storytelling aspect that would entertain an audience. But how do we do that in our own marketing that is, through content development, through this podcast or through any other types of lead generation strategies?
Yeah, there's a couple approaches that I, teach my clients. I mean, the first one is that 1 or 10 or even 30 pieces of content probably aren't enough for you to learn what you need to learn in order to develop the content your audience wants. And so I actually won't take a request from a client to do an article or 10 articles. I offer only what I call a blog subscription service, but basically 2 to 4 articles every week. And we do that at a really affordable rate with high quality approaches to trying to solve customer problems. So the first one is consistency. Persistence really does make a difference.
Okay.
The second is really just committing to being customer focused. So for example, I tell my clients, let's write down every question you think your customers have ever asked, or every question your sales team gets, or the frequently asked questions kind of approach. And then let's go commit to answering those questions in the simplest, most basic ways. So the first step is consistency. The second is listing out all the questions that you think your audience is asking. Then the third, this is where it gets difficult. Then we have to start, trying to figure out how do we get more human. One of the ways that I love to do that is through what I call employee activation. And so, for example, the people who know the answers to customer questions inside every organization are the experts that, sit around the company. They're usually not in marketing. They're usually not necessarily in agencies. They're the engineers and the salespeople and the product people that are sitting around the organization. Let's figure out how to get them to tell their stories. And that's how I think we can start to get companies to be a little bit more human. It's not just agency created, drogified, high sort of, cost types of creative, but real people telling real stories. That's the best way to attract the customers that we're trying to reach.
Michael, we've been talking a lot about top of funnel stuff. What's working in sort of middle funnel and bottom of funnel as we're trying to take someone who's interested in what we have and move them through the sales journey?
Yeah, Gartner did some really great research on this, and specifically they were looking at how do brands help to make the buying process easier for companies. And what they found was that some ridiculous number like 75, 80% of buyers thought that the process wasn't good, wasn't bad, but awful. That the buying process that they experienced with the brands they bought from was awful. And that word really kind of stuck with me. 75, 80% of buyers think the buying process is awful. The thing that they said would improve it was very simple. It was tools, buying tools, things like buyer's guide, comparison guides, putting pricing on your website. I use the term definitive guides. I work with, Marketo and companies like that to create the definitive guide to buying marketing automation software, as a great example. Tools, calculators, not case studies necessarily, but profiles of customers and the journey that that they went through in order to make that buying decision or buying process. Those are the kinds of tools, calculators that I think buyers are looking for, and just not enough of the companies out there are producing those pieces of content.
We were both at the same conference, the Adobe Summit conference, and fantastic. It's like 18,000 people. At times it felt like too many people, but it was a big conversation was around sales experience. What do you see? And you give us some good examples, but just chime in here a little bit about sales experience and what that means to companies.
Well, I mean, the big trend, and I do this in every speech I give. The world has changed because of digital, social, mobile technologies. We're seeing brands that have been around for a long time get disrupted by these new players in the market. The new players are disrupting. The Ubers, the Netflixes, the Apples and the Starbucks are all doing what they're doing because they're focused on customer experiences. Adobe spent a lot of time talking about customer experience. They talked about the sales experience as that last step in the long buyer journey. But the sales team has to be focused more on helping buyers buy and not on selling products. Satya Nadella from Microsoft, who I think is a brilliant example of an organization and a leader. He uses the word that I like to use that I think is overused and makes people's eyes roll a little bit too much, but it's empathy. He said that empathy is the key to making organizations feel for their customers and put their buyers ahead of their products, or put customers ahead of product. Buyers, are looking for that. Salespeople need to start to think that way as well. So customer experience, that's why I'm getting into organizational change. I'm getting into leadership development. I'm getting into, I've said that CMOs need to own culture. All of this is because the customer experience is the driving force for the companies that are winning in today's environment.
Well, Michael, you have talked about a lot of different things with content strategy, but I know one thing that's we haven't touched on. I want to ask you, content promotion, like once you create it, many people just move right on to the next thing. I've done that for years with the podcast, but last year, almost a year ago to the day, we decided to promote our strategy a lot differently, the content that we create. So what could you share with us about promotion strategies?
It's a really simple approach that I recommend, and it's the Hollywood model. And Hollywood doesn't make movies and then just like throw the movie on a shelf. They make movies. 50% of the budget, and most people don't realize this, 50% of the budget numbers we hear about Hollywood movies goes towards the actors and the extras and the food and the sets and the equipment. The other 50% goes to promotion of that great piece of content they've invested in. I think brands need to do the same thing. The Hollywood model is 50% of what you spend on creating content should get spent or twice, essentially, if you spend $1 on a piece of content, you should spend $1 on promotion. The audiences, people aren't, buyers aren't just sitting around waiting for you to create a piece of content so they can go looking for it. We've got to meet people where they are. It takes budget to do that.
Is there any one particular strategy you like that has been paid off lately with clients?
Well, like I said, the one is spend $1 for every $1 you spend on creation. The other one, though, is only bet on your winners. And what I mean by that is, I do tests, a lot of testing. And a couple of years ago, I worked with LinkedIn on a mutual client, and we tested they were basically putting paid promotion behind every piece of content. And the theory was, what would happen if we put only our paid promotion behind the best pieces of content in any given week or month? And what we found is when we took that approach, it's called betting on the winners. When we bet on the winners, and the winners were defined as the pieces of content that generated the most organic social engagement after about 3 days. Once we saw that at the 3-day mark, we saw who was performing better than the average or benchmark. We only put the paid promotion money on those pieces of content. We saw a 3x increase in the amount of traffic and engagement we got from that spend. So one, spend $1 for every $1 you spend on creation. 2, bet on your winners, and you'll see a massive increase in impact.
I love that. Michael, our audience has been tuning into this. How could they get to know more about what you have and what you're doing, what you're up to?
Yeah, check out what we're doing on marketinginsidergroup.com. Like I said, we kind of take our own medicine. We publish, I write 2 articles a week. I try to publish about 4 to 6 articles every week on that site. Thought leadership education around marketing strategy, content marketing, employee activation, all the things that not just marketers, but I think leaders and organizations need to know. You can check me out on LinkedIn, just look for Michael Brenner, or on Twitter @BrennerMichael, and would love to connect with your audience there.
Well, thanks for being here at Leaders in the Trenches.
Thanks for having me, Gene.
What a great interview. Really love having Michael talk about some of the things that are working right now and some of the mistakes that are very common across all growth. So if you are creating content for your business, and you probably are, if you are not promoting it the way it could be promoted, then hopefully the strategies here will help you. I'd be glad to help you with some of the strategies I've been using to promote my business. If you've been seeing my ads or you've been seeing the podcast all over the place because you visited my website one time, I'll share with you some of those strategies, some of the things that would help you grow your business. All you have to do is reach out to me at gene@genehammett.com. I'd love to just give it away to you. So if you have any questions about growth in that aspect or anything else, just reach out to me anytime you want. Gene@genehammett.com. As always, lead with courage. I'll see you next time.